Check, check. Hey, good day, everybody. How are y'all doing? Good. Well, welcome, welcome. We're so proud to have all of you here with us for this time to recognize and celebrate Hispanic heritage, not just here on Wallace State's campus, but worldwide, for all the contributions that have been made by people of Hispanic and Latin heritage. Today we have the great opportunity to have Dr. Paul Joseph Fontanez here with us to tell you about his heritage and his career path, which prepare to be amazed. Dr. Paul Fontanez currently serves as Deputy Director for Architecture Assessment for the U.S. Department of Defense Missile Defense Agency, and he's also the chair of the Small Business Innovation Research and Small Business Technology Transfer Research Council. Dr. Fontanez is a graduate of the State University of New York at Binghamton with a Bachelor of Science degree in Physics and Mathematics. He also holds a Master of Science in Systems Management with honors, 4.0 GPA from Capital Technical University, also a Master's of Science in Systems Engineering from George Washington University, also, man, I'm putting a lot of alsos and commas in here, also a Doctor of Philosophy and Public Policy with an emphasis in economic development from George Mason University, and also locally. He got a couple of pieces of paper here from Wallace State. Also a private helicopter pilot certificate from right up the road at Folsom Field. Dr. Paul was also commissioned as a United States Marine Corps officer and has served continuously with the U.S. Department of Defense since 1984, during which time he has won numerous awards for meritorious service. He's also a recipient of the Great Minds in Science, Technology, Engineering, and Mathematics 2019 National STEM Hero Award. During his service to the U.S. government, he's traveled extensively throughout Europe, Central Asia, and the Far East. Dr. Paul has language abilities in Russian, Spanish, and French, and has published his doctoral thesis on regional economic growth in the former Soviet Commonwealth of Independent States. If you would, everybody, please help me in welcoming Dr. Paul Fontanez here to the stage.
Thank you very much for that gracious introduction. I've got some prepared notes here I'm going to share with you, but I want to tell you how humbled I am just to be here. What they didn't mention is, like all of you here, I am also a student at Wallace State, working on my associate degree in flight technology. And if there's one theme that you take away from this is that learning never ends. The second you stop learning is the second you stop growing, and when you stop growing, you're not growing and living. And so let me get to my prepared notes here. I'll share a little bit with you about what National Hispanic Heritage Month is and the observation. I will go ahead and talk to you about what the theme is for that this year, and then share a couple of little insights with respect to how that heritage has shaped the person I am today and what my hope is for future generations. At the end of that, I'll try and keep that brief, but don't hold me to that. You know how guest speakers are. And at the end of that, I'll open it up to the audience for any questions that you may have. And so why is National Hispanic Heritage Month important? Hispanic Heritage Week was first proclaimed by President Lyndon Johnson back in 1968, and eventually it was elevated to National Hispanic Heritage Month by President Ronald Reagan, who signed it into law in 1988. The period was established as that time frame every year from 15 September to 15 October to recognize the contributions and influence of Hispanic Americans on the history, culture, and achievements of the United States. It is important that we as a nation recognize this period for a lot of reasons. Three that come to the forefront of my mind is, one, we celebrate to honor those Americans of Hispanic descent who have made the ultimate sacrifice for our country, our state, and our communities. Whether you're a soldier, sailor, airman, a Marine, a police officer, a first responder, a sheriff, all of these contributions that Hispanic Americans have made in those areas, some have had to pay the ultimate price. And so part of that monthly celebration every year is to remember and honor their sacrifice. Another one that comes to the forefront of my mind is to recognize the tremendous contributions Hispanic Americans have made since the founding of our nation and continue to make today in the areas of science, technology, engineering, mathematics, business, arts, and the trade skills. And the third one that I'll think of today is just to acknowledge that the tapestry of our nation and the great state of Alabama is made strong by including, valuing, and honoring the diverse cultures that are here with us, heritages and backgrounds of those who we go to school with, those who we live with in our communities and in our neighborhoods. That includes Hispanic Americans as well as Americans from all backgrounds, all cultures, and all ethnicities and creeds. So this year's theme for National Hispanic Heritage Month observation is the word Esperanza, a celebration of Hispanic heritage and hope. And so as I heard that, I pondered the question, what does that mean to me? And so in my mind, Esperanza is a beautiful Spanish word. It has many meanings, including expectation, prospect, anticipation, promise, but most importantly, hope. The writer Alexander Pope captured the essence of the word Esperanza most poetically when he wrote, "Hope springs eternal in the human breast." It is thought that regardless of the circumstances we find ourselves in present, there is an expectation, a desired future state or outcome that will be better than the state that we are in today. Every mother, every father, every grandparent carries that seed of hope in their hearts for a better future for their children, their grandchildren, and their families. That esperanza is what drives us as human beings to press forward through difficulties, trials, and tribulations, to aim higher, to go farther, and reach for a better end state than the ones we may find ourselves in today. For many Hispanic Americans, esperanza is the embodiment of faith in the Creator who we were taught about as children. He who has plans for us to prosper, plans to give us hope and a future. As we look back over the uncertainty of this past year's pandemic, the economic hardships that it's brought, this year's theme of esperanza is timely and sorely needed. The third point I want to hit today is my heritage has had a profound influence on the person that I am today. There are three key aspects of my upbringing that have shaped me, and those are faith, education, and dedication. And I'll share a couple of words in each of those three areas with you. With respect to faith, my parents were American missionaries to Latin America up until the time that I was born. In fact, my dad said, I learned years later, you can't be president if you're not born in the U.S. We need to get you back home. And so my mother delivered in Texas, so I'm proud to say that I'm a Texan as well. So they were missionaries, and their travels from that region back to the United States were wrought with perils. I mean, if you think about the early 60s, roads weren't great, infrastructure wasn't great. But although they were wrought with perils, they were also full of miraculous deliverance from each one of those perils. As a child, I remember stories of my parents telling me that they had been stopped when they were entering into Texas by an unknown peace officer who told them, I quote, "God told me to wait here on this corner for someone. That someone is you." And that officer then proceeded to give my father and mother accommodations, help my father find employment. You know, these are the pieces of my heritage that's in faith and in an understanding of who our Creator is that give me that unshakable foundation, which we all need to have to be able to press forward securely. And so as such, the importance of relationships with family and others and an immutable faith in a sovereign creator are the cornerstones of my heritage that have shaped part of the person that I am today. With respect to education, the death of my grandfather, Francisco. Now, my grandfather, Francisco, was a Spaniard. He was born in 1872. If he was alive today, he'd be like over 150 years old. So that's a long period of time between me and my granddad. But my grandfather, Francisco, he passed away when my dad, Joe, was only 8 years old. He left my dad without formal schooling. My father never finished the 3rd grade. He grew up fatherless in the streets of New York, trying to make ends meet while helping his mother, my grandmother Josephine, support a family of 13 in the Depression era. The lack of higher education made my dad have to work longer and harder than the next guy to support his family. As a result, my father promised himself that he would do everything in his power to make sure that his children would have the opportunity to get an education, the education that he never got. As we were growing up, my dad would move us, we lived in New York City, my dad would move us from borough to different apartments to make sure that as we were growing up, we were zoned in the schools that had the best education, just so that he could help us to try and get a leg up from where he was at being uneducated. His efforts were not in vain. At an early age in my life, I was admitted into the specially gifted program in New York City, which enabled me to have violin instruction when I was 3 years old. It enabled me to have 7 years of French before I had finished high school. It enabled me to have 3 years of Russian language training by the time I had finished high school at the age of 16. Today I hold a doctorate, 2 masters, and all those other things on that laundry list that were mentioned, but it's not just me. My brother holds a bachelor's degree, a master's degree, and a Juris Doctorate, and was recently selected for promotion to full bird colonel in the Army. My youngest brother holds a master's degree and a bachelor's degree, has been a high school principal in the state of Tennessee, and is now a senior pastor of a church in Johnson City. My sister, my youngest sister, is a registered nurse and a first responder with a degree on her own. And ultimately, after my dad felt that his labors were completed by getting his children an education, in his 50s, he went back and he finished his GED. He finished his bachelor's degree. He went on to finish a master's degree and went on to teach in the Tennessee public school system until he retired from there. He's 84 years old today, still kicking. Accordingly, pursuit of academic excellence and higher education are aspects of my heritage that have not only profoundly shaped me, but they've also profoundly shaped my family. I want to encourage each of you right now that as you begin this journey on education and the pursuit of excellence, that you don't give up. Like a bulldog, grab it by the teeth and don't let it go. Don't ever stop learning. Always seek to improve yourself. You know, the good book tells us that wisdom is something to be cherished and sought after. And while you're seeking after it, the good book also tells us to get understanding. And so, the third piece is with respect to dedication. I come from a rich Hispanic heritage of military service to our country. And not only military service, but I also have lots of cousins and uncles that have also served in our communities as law enforcement officers and first responders as well. My father served as a paratrooper and a cannoneer in the U.S. Army during the Korean era. My uncles Caleb and Felix served in the U.S. Army at the invasion of Normandy during World War II. My uncle Mo and Frank, they served in the U.S. Air Force. That heritage of tradition continues today. I have nieces and nephews in every branch of the armed forces, as well as 2 children in the Air Force and in the Navy. My 39 years of service in the Department of Defense is a reflection of the dedication not only to duty, but to the American way of life that I hold dear, and I hope you all hold it dear as well. My volunteering for military service in the United States Marine Corps was a seminal moment in my life. Upon entering the Marine Corps at the young age of 21, I quickly identified with that warrior ethos of honor, courage, and commitment. That ethos became and still remains a central part of my life today. My dedication to honor has guided me to strive for ethical and moral behavior in myself. And that is the standard that we need to hold ourselves to. We need to hold those standards and values of moral and ethical behavior. My dedication to courage has helped me with the mental and physical courage necessary to endure and overcome hardship and adversity. I drew upon these in that fateful day on Tuesday, September the 11th, 2001, when I was working in the Pentagon and that plane hit our building. I was 2 stories down and I was responsible for evacuating the people in the section that I was in. That was a very hard day. You make it through days like that by having a moral compass, by knowing in who you believe in and drawing strength from those values. My dedication to God, family, and country has enabled me to fulfill the commitment needed to be a faithful servant to the trust placed on me not only by the Marine Corps and as a U.S. government civilian official, but also as a deacon in my church, a husband to my wife, a father to my 8 children. Dedication to values other than self have been a key aspect of my heritage that have profoundly shaped who I am today. And so I know our lecture today, or our discussion today, is about National Hispanic Heritage Month. And as you can tell, I am an Hispanic American. Those are some of the things that have shaped me. But I don't believe that those things are unique to only Hispanic Americans. But they should be part of every American, regardless of creed or ethnicity or background. You have to have those values, that moral compass, that drive, and that drive can't be for selfish reasons. That drive needs to be for the purpose of serving others, serving your community, serving your families, serving your fellow man. Because it is only from those kind of things that you derive true satisfaction in your accomplishments. If you're in it for the money, you may make the money, but that's not going to make you happy. What's going to make you happy, it's going to give you pleasure, is the legacy that you leave by the things that you accomplished in helping others. That pursuit of education, that pursuit of knowledge, that pursuit of wisdom, in addition to establishing relationships with those around you, are the basic foundation for you to go to places where you've never been and accomplish things that you may have never dreamed of. Always keep your Creator as the center of that foundation, and you will never go wrong. And so, my apologies if I've been a little long-winded. I do appreciate the invitation and the great honor that you have bestowed upon me by letting me chat with you. At this point, I'd like to open the floor to any questions that anybody may have about my background. I was talking with a couple of the professors in the back. So I speak 4 languages. I've been to 39 countries around the world. Lived in Russia for 2 years, been all over Europe, been to the Holy Land, been to East Asia, both Korea, Japan, the Philippines, Australia. And so I've come across a lot of people, both in a professional and a personal capacity. So if there's any questions that you have that you want to throw my way, have at it. Sir.
Yeah, Dr. Paul, how about, at what point did you go for your helicopter's license? Has that been in the last 5 years when you did that?
So I am currently a private pilot helicopter working on my commercial rating at the flight school here at Wallace State. I started that back, I think, in 2019. So never too late to start. I turned 58 2 weeks ago, so I started right about when I was, let's do the math, maybe 54, 55. And so eat healthy, exercise, trust in your Creator, and He'll give you the health that you need to be able to do things. You know, the good book tells me that each one of my days is appointed and known before the first one ever began. So I don't really know what those are. But I'm a man of faith, and I'm stepping out and I'm asking God to give me 100 years. I may drop dead tomorrow. I don't know what God has in His future. But that's not going to stop me from continuing to press toward the mark to learn more, do more, and for those things that you weren't able to accomplish when you were younger, it's never too late to go back. And so Long answer to your short question, I think about 3 years ago I started. I probably would have made a little more progress if I didn't have A, a full-time job, B, 8 children, and C, the pandemic, which has precluded a lot of things from happening easily. But you know what, we'll get over this. We'll get over it, and things will be better in the long run. Sir, you had a question back there?
Of all of your achievements, which one are you most proud of?
Of all of my achievements, and all the academics, and all the language, the one that I'm most proud of is the fact that each one of my sons and daughters love the Lord with all their heart and lean not unto their own understanding. That is the basis of why I have any pride at all. Sir.
You've accomplished a lot, and we're grateful that you're here. I mean, you kind of alluded to it in your response just a moment ago, but how do you balance it all? You know, you mentioned, you're deacon in the church, you have 8 children, you have a wonderful career, God has blessed you clearly. Any light or anything you want to shed on balancing just life and all the aspects that you're involved in or have been involved in?
So that is one of the toughest things. You know, you go through phases in your life, and some phases you put category A of most importance, and some phases category B. I'm looking back right now. I took a course last month. It was called Warrior Ethos. It was a leadership course, and it talked about the average lifespan of the American today. It's right around 78. Surprisingly, we're going backwards from where we were at a lifespan of 82. But this chart that they had online, and I could send that as a reference if you're interested, it kind of, in little grid squares by week, it showed the breakout of what the average American is in terms of those phases in their life over the 78 years worth of weeks that they have. And what's sad is, as I look back now, if I had that understanding, would I have maybe placed a little bit of emphasis different than I would have? Yeah. But you can't go back and fix things, but you can try and fix them now. So the balance of work and life is difficult, but the bottom line is we've got to work. And depending on where you feel God has called you in your future and what is laid out in your path, there are certain times where you're going to have to prioritize that work. Should you prioritize it at the exclusiveness of your family? No. That's a recipe for disaster. For those of you that are either married or thinking about getting married, your number one responsibility is to your spouse. If your spouse is not happy, things are not going to go well for you in your personal life, and the whole rest of it is going to unravel. So make sure that when you undertake those commitments, that you focus on your spouse and then your family. God first, of course. Work is going to be there. If you have faith in your Creator and understand that His hand is upon everything, He's going to move on the hearts of minds and men to make sure that stuff at work goes okay for you. The other thing is that you have to have wisdom in selecting the career path that you're going to be in. If you choose a career path because you think you're going to make a lot of money in it, and maybe you get a degree in that and you start working at it, you may wind up miserable. And if that's the case, don't feel like you're stuck there. Go and do something else. Because there is a tremendous amount of relationship between stress that we take upon our lives and doing things in a job that is not, it's not your bent. It's not where you're happy. Life is very short. Make sure you work in an area that you're happy, that you like your coworkers, and don't worry about the pay. Yeah, we all need pay. Pay goes up over time. But be happy, because that is going to affect your family life, your personal life, and most importantly, your health. You know, I'll share with you now, it's not in the notes, it won't cost you any extra. I'm 58, I've had 2 heart stents put in me, because when I was a Marine, I was nonstop. I did not take no for an answer. I pressed towards the mark, and that, coupled with poor eating, got me 2 major arteries that were clogged at 90 and 95%. If it hadn't been for my wife that said, I'm taking you to the hospital right now, I'd have probably been dead that weekend. And so they went in and they put a couple of stents in me. That was about 5 or 6 years ago. And for whatever reason, the Creator has permitted me to go ahead and persevere on. And so the question that I've asked myself over and over again is, now what do I do with that extra time that He's given me? And so, you didn't ask why I'm in the helicopter program, aside from the fact that I've always wanted to fly. My intent is to try and use that in the service of being a missionary overseas. Because the one thing the Marine Corps taught me is never walk when you can ride and never ride when you can fly. And I hear all these missionary stories about, well, we got there to the airport and then we traveled 12 miles on this bumpy road and another, 12 hours on this road and another 8 hours on this trail. And I thought, you could probably get there in about 35 to 40 minutes in a helicopter. So that's one of the reasons why I'm taking this helicopter training. But it's something I enjoy. It gives me great pleasure. And I think I have a plan that I'll be able to use it for a greater purpose to serve others. Now, whether that plan pans out or not, I don't know. I don't have a crystal ball. But I think my heart is in the right place. And so you constantly have to keep asking yourselves those questions. Is my heart in the right place as I'm pursuing this? Am I doing the right thing? Nobody's going to judge you but you and your Creator after this is all said and done. So do the best that you can. And the other long thing for longevity and health is relationships with others around you. You look at statistical studies of centenarians. For example, I was stationed in the island of Okinawa, Japan for 3 years. Okinawa, Japan, at one point in time in the recent past, had the highest concentration of centenarians in the world. And they did a lot of studies on them, and one of the things that they found out is, aside from, the fresh seafood diet and all that, the key denominator was support group in your older age, of meaningful relationships with those around you. That's a key contributor to health and reduction of stress. So think about the relationships that you have with your people right now. If you're in good relationships, nurture those. If you're in toxic relationships, see what you can do to make them better. But if not, don't allow those toxic relationships to take you to a place where you don't want to go, or hold you someplace where you didn't want to be that long. Any other questions? Yes, ma'am.
During, while you were going to school for all of your achievements, how did you stay focused during that time?
Great question. So how did I stay focused on all that academic work while all that other stuff was going on? So I'll share a couple of insights with you on that. God doesn't make everybody the same. I have 8 children, and I had great aspirations for all of them. Love them all equally and dearly, but from when they were very little, a couple of weeks old, I could tell they had their individual personalities, and they all had their individual giftings, and their giftings are all different. Some people are gifted with good memories and they can memorize things. Some people have to work really hard to memorize the same amount of stuff and put in maybe 4 or 5 times the amount of effort. That doesn't mean that both of them can't get A's. So as I was going through all those times, when I was very young, like I said, I finished my senior year of high school when I entered my senior year of high school when I was 15, graduated when I was 16, started college when I was 16. I was young, I was smart, I was an idiot. Okay? I didn't know what was important. I had been brought up the right way, and this is another key aspect. The decision is ultimately going to be yours. No matter what kind of heritage or culture your parents, your brothers, your sisters, your friends put on you, ultimately your success or demise is going to depend on the decisions that you make. And so when I was young, I did not do really well in school. In high school I did well, but my first year of college, first year and a half, I struggled with a big S struggle. And so I had to learn my lesson the hard way. And then at that point, I was able to knuckle under and finish with a degree in physics and mathematics. Individually by themselves, not the easiest subjects. And I'm not saying I had a 4.0 GPA for those degrees. I will tell you I had a 4.0 GPA for my master's degree and a 3.9 in my other master's and a 3.8 in my doctorate. So what was different later on in life than earlier? It was my focus and how I applied things. And so that's part of it. The other part goes back to the support group. When I was working full-time as a young Marine and I wanted to get that first master's degree, which I absolutely needed to get promoted to the next position, I couldn't have done that with 5 kids at home and working full-time if my wife had not supported me. And I will tell you, without the support of my wife for each one of those master's degrees and that doctorate degree, I would have never made it. So choose your lifelong partner wisely. And with that, pray that God has given you a good memory or the ability to improve that memory, which of course happens like any other muscle as you exercise it. So I got to the point where I had one doctoral level class and the instructor came in and he gave us a sheet of 100 questions. At the beginning of class, he said, your final exam will come from these questions. No answers, of course, just the questions. I didn't know any better. It was like my first or second class in my doctorate. I took them verbatim. I read each one of those questions. I found the answer to each one of those questions, and I memorized all 100 questions. I walked out of there in about 30 minutes with an A in that class. It was one of the hardest classes, analysis classes in the doctoral program. So listen to your instrucors carefully. They're not there to trip you up. They're there to give you some hints and help you out. So if they say study this, study that, and just apply yourself. Memorizing 100 questions didn't come easy. It came by repetition, over and over and over again. Read it, say it aloud, cover it up. Whatever technique works for you, you've got to find that. And I'm sure that they have a learning center here where folks can help you to master those techniques, to be a continuing lifelong student. Because that's what I'm here to encourage you today. Don't think that the associate's degree you get out of here or the certificate you get out here is the end. It's only the beginning. Beginning of a rich, long life. Another question. Ma'am.
Could you talk perhaps to our students a little bit about what it would look like if they decided that they'd like to be a civilian employee with the federal government at the Arsenal or somewhere else? What does that look like for associate's degrees, certificates, or just the federal application process?
Yes, ma'am. So first and foremost, there is a federal application process. It's called USA Jobs. So if you type that in your web browser, Google, whatever you're using, Bing, just type USA Jobs, and there's a very good front-end web page there that'll kind of define all the steps and everything that you need to go through. That site will require you to have a cobbled together resume. And of course, there's lots of jobs in there, and they're all different kinds of jobs and all kinds of specialty areas in all different locations around the country, each with their own requirements. There are many levels of jobs with the government. Some do not require a four-year degree, and some do. The higher paying jobs, the ones that will give you the greater opportunity for advancement up the scale, is going to be one of those with a 4-year degree. But there are jobs there that do not necessarily require a 4-year degree, and there are also programs that the government has that enables you to intern with them the last 2 years of college. The government will allow you to intern with them, you'll work on your security clearance, and it will help you fast track into an opportunity to work with the government. I highly encourage you to check those out. Like I said, there's different grade scales for government work, from GS1 all the way through GS15. Not only is it rewarding because you're serving your fellow American, but as you mature and you get toward those higher scales, I think this year the top end of the GS15 Step 10 scale tops out at like $172,000 a year. And so as a 4-year graduate or 4-year college student, are you going to start off? No, you're not. It's going to take you a long time to work up that ladder. But there's opportunity for advancement there. There's a lot of good equal opportunity checks and balances in there, so everybody gets a fair shake. I'm in a program in the organization that I'm in, which is a performance-based program. And it's great. You work with wonderful people, bright people, everybody pushing toward the mark to advance to the highest level of technology and innovation our nation can. And I'll tell you, it's just a pleasure to work around people like that. And I'll be honest with you, a lot of those people are not there for the money. They're so bright and they have so many skills, they could go somewhere else and be making twice that amount in industry. They're there because they love our nation, they love the people they work with, and the job is challenging, demanding, and rewarding. And so from that government job perspective, there are some jobs that are available once you have an associate degree. I would say the vast majority of them are going to be for those that have four-year degrees, and four-year degrees in any kind of discipline. There's jobs in nursing, there's jobs in business, there's jobs in finance, there's jobs in engineering and technology, and the sciences. So whatever God has put on your heart as your bent that you like to do, there's going to be opportunity there if you'd like to pursue that. Does that answer your question, ma'am? Anybody else? Yes, ma'am.
Can you talk a little bit about the perspective that you've gained from traveling the world and how that has impacted your life? And also, if you could share some tips on learning multiple languages.
Okay. So the first part, traveling around the world, I mentioned I'd been, last count, it was 39 countries around the world. Lived a couple of years in Russia. Been to the Middle East, been to Israel, spent time in Belarus, Poland, almost all of the Scandinavian countries, most of Europe, Italy, Germany, France, Portugal, Spain, as well as Canada. I've been to Mexico twice, Japan, the Philippines, Australia, and so forth. And so there are different levels of development, different social cultures, different mores in almost every society that I've been at. The key, I think, is to understand, although God made America the greatest nation on the face of this earth, that doesn't give us the right to be haughty or proud. And you see the funny stories where an American will go to a country and the foreigner doesn't understand them, so they'll just repeat the phrase in English louder as if that's going to go ahead and get some kind of effect. I have found that people all over the world, they all want the same thing that we do. They want peace, they want prosperity for their family, they want health. Their cultural norms and values may be different than ours, but they all want some of these same basic things. And if you go to a foreign country with that in mind, and don't think that just because God has given you all that you have is what everybody else should have, and put yourself in their shoes, walk in their shoes for a mile, things will go a lot better for you, and you will see that you can make friends easily, very easily. Thank you, sir. So I went to Israel about 2.5 years ago, and I went there with my wife, and we didn't go there on a big budget. So I saved up my air miles, and we flew there on air miles. I saved up my hotel miles, and I stayed in a Hilton hotel over there. And except for one day where we took a charter bus, the rest of the time, we're hoofing it on the streets. We're riding the taxis. I'm sorry, not the taxis, the buses and the trains with everybody else. And so we wanted to go up to the Garden of Gethsemane, which is right there at the edge of Jerusalem, and it also borders on the Arab side. And so we walked up there, and the sun is setting, and we taken our pictures, and I thought, hey, we better hurry up and get back. And so we start walking down one of the side streets, the sun is setting, and all of a sudden we find ourselves in an Arab neighborhood. And unfortunately, as many languages as I've been exposed to, I don't speak Arabic. And so we waited there at the bus stop, and we got on the bus, and the bus was full. And I'll tell you, the people there were some of the most gracious people that I've ever come across. They offered to get up and give my wife a seat. They were very friendly in helping me try to exchange the money that I needed to ride the bus. And at that point, I had an epiphany that, sometimes people report stuff in different media, whether it's on the news or the radio. There is nothing like firsthand empirical knowledge and observing things yourself. And it was at that point that I realized, no matter what ethnicity or nation you're calling yourself over there, people want the same basic thing, like I just mentioned. And you never really find that out unless if you go firsthand and see it for yourself. There's a lot of studies out there and books that we can read, and you can garner great general broad perspectives on things. Sometimes they're right, sometimes they're not. But there's nothing like firsthand empirical data. The reason I was able to successfully complete my dissertation is because I went to Kyrgyzstan, to their national archives, and I got firsthand empirical data that had not been analyzed in the West before. That was my claim to fame. And so I encourage you, if you have the opportunity, even if it's here and in our own country where you have different neighborhoods with different ethnicities, don't be afraid to go out there and observe and socialize and try and learn things firsthand. From a language perspective, although my mother and father did speak Spanish, Spanish was a second language to them. English was a first language. So they never taught me any Spanish. My younger brothers and sisters are still a little disappointed in that. But one thing that they did for me, again, I was enrolled in the gifted program in New York City, so I got exposed to Romance languages, French in particular, very early. And so that immediately started developing that part of your brain that if you don't have a second language, you're at a disadvantage. The other thing that my parents did is we went to a full gospel church that preached in Spanish. And so the church was in Spanish, the Bibles were in Spanish, and when you're a 12 or 13-year-old kid and everything's going on around you, sometimes you just got to pick up that book and just start reading. And so I noticed that the French helped me with the Spanish, and I was able to teach myself Spanish. I've been to places in Spain, all around the world, and they say that my Spanish is impeccable. I don't know if they were being nice or not, but I think it depends on what your determination is to want to be able to communicate and converse with others. I will tell you that once you have a second language in your brain, if you stay in that same language group, the other ones are easy. So I had all that French, taught myself Spanish, went to Italy, spent some time there. Man, Italian, just a lot of the words are really similar. Same thing with Portuguese. At first, if you're a Spanish speaker and a French speaker, you listen to Portuguese and you try and figure out what the heck is going on here. But then, if you think about it and the etymology of words, you learn that T-I-O-N, that shun ending that we have in English and in Spanish, well, that's a C cedilla A-O in Portuguese, so operation in English, operación in Spanish becomes operação in Portuguese, and all of a sudden it's like a Rosetta Stone. So I will tell you with respect to, from learning languages, once you have proficiency in a second language, it is less hard to master some of the other languages. Now, some languages are not in the same food group, so to speak, like Russian. Russian is a Cyrillic language, but to some extent it is also a Romance-based language. And so the difference with Russian is besides not having a Romanized alphabet, they have a Cyrillic alphabet, and once you choke that one down and get that over, you recognize a lot of Romance languages words in Russian. So for example, in French, the word for floor is étage. Well, in Russian, the word for floor is étage. And so you have a lot of these similarities that you cross over, and the Russians are very gracious to give us credits in English. They rob a lot of our words. So for example, if I was going to go to a parking space, I would go to a parkovka. Or if I was going to go to a meeting, I would go na meeting. But not briefing, because a briefing is a political protest. So some things get a little twisted up. But there's little things like that once you've learned one or two languages and you kind of learn the roots of those languages, others become easier. Does that answer your question, ma'am? So I encourage you, travel. Travel while you're young. Travel before you get, a family and 8 children and it's like $1 bazillion to go anywhere, including down the block. I'll tell you, we did a lot of our vacations in the States as the kids were younger. We started with a Volvo station wagon which seated 7. We then had to migrate to a Suburban which seated 9, and then at some point we had to evolve into the E350 Super Duty Club Wagon, a 15 passenger. And so get your traveling done while you're early and while you can still afford it. There's a lot of good deals out there. You just got to watch those price watchers and don't be afraid to go. Any other last questions? Ladies and gentlemen, you've really honored me by putting up with my babbling here. I am very, very grateful, not only to be here, but to be a fellow co-student working on my associate's degree with everybody else. And so please feel free to reach out to me anytime if you have any questions or you want to follow up on some of the things that I've mentioned. And please keep pressing toward the mark. Thank you.